we are the ones who invented digital technology, really. We are the ones who institutionalized it. We are the ones who built the infrastructure. We are the ones who spent money that no one else had to bring this technology, this medium, this form of communication. What we've discovered is, yes, these things have a mind of their own, but they are not our friends. Just because we created them does not mean that these things are our friends, whether they are visible or invisible. You know, something like this, or something, I've lost my phone, something like this, you know, or like all the invisible stuff that makes this kind of stuff work. Algorithms, programs, software, you know, 5G is coming any day now. And what this means is a world in which there's no latency, there's no sort of lag time in the communications between devices, whether visible or invisible. There's already an infinite number of them in the world, an infinite number that seems set to continue to grow. And rather than digital technology opening the door onto, you know, the consummation of America's benign rule over the world, it's been kind of a tailspin, and a lot of people freaking out, and a lot of reversals of fortune. We created Five Eyes, the world's greatest, most powerful intelligence network, and it's just been humiliation after humiliation. We thought that we could use these technologies to make more money off of China's rise than China could. That turned out not to be correct. Many failures, many shocks to the system, to ordinary Americans, and to those in charge. Those in charge have been deeply, gravely embarrassed by their inability to take charge of these machines that they've created, the networks that they spun up, with the thought of consummating their form of, you know, their benign form of global rule. It didn't happen. And that, I think, is as strong an indicator as any, that, you know, every time one of these big transfers in dominant communications technology happens, there are profound reverberations. And if we do not understand how media works, how communication technologies work, and how they have independent formative effects on our lives inside and out, then we'll continue to be surprised. You know, at this point in the game, more surprise will lead, I think, to more pain.
You mentioned the ancients for a second, and they also thought through technology, and I mean Aristotle specifically, and he understood that there can be technology which makes human beings more powerful and more autonomous. And he mentions it in a couple of lines in politics, and then he moves on from it because he rejects it. And part of the reason he rejects it is something like what you described now. It seems to make you stronger, but it actually makes you weaker. It gives you various pleasures that are exorbitant, that corrupt political virtues, that make you believe that, you know, you deserve more than you do because you have these new powers. And so he thinks that a free people actually has to reject these things. We went in the opposite direction. And we're living through some of the problems that he described. Your big focus is on the imagination. How digital technology specifically takes over the kind of images given to us in the previous generation through television. What is that thesis? How does that sound?
So, certain Straussians will accuse Aristotle of having lied about causation. Or that guys will say, well, you know, there really isn't formal cause. And Aristotle knew this, but he was just going to basically lie about it. I would be inclined to disagree. I think formal cause is real. And it's not, you know, the way that it's often portrayed in sort of lazy science, lazy education. The metaphor that's often used is like, well, you know, the architect has an idea for a building, creates a blueprint, and the blueprint is the formal cause of the building. And that is not correct. That is not Aristotle. What Aristotle says is, no, there's a certain, it's like environmental shaping force. And that you can see this, Aristotle says, in living things, where the anima, the soul, if you will, is kind of the formal cause. The current living creature. But you can also find this, obviously, in logical life, and you can find it in Drake, and again, yes, in technological life. Marshall McLuhan and his son basically spent the 80s doing their level best in a scholarly way to understand media effects. They thought that Aristotle was right about causes, they wanted to understand effects. And so they landed on a sort of schema, a heuristic, where there were 4 different major effects that kind of corresponded in a loose way to Aristotle's 4 causes. And so for Aristotle, it was important that this was not sort of like a linear sort of process. It was like 4 discernible causes, all of which could be happening in different ways simultaneously. And so the McLuhans landed on a schema where there are like 4 kinds of immediate effects that will all be happening simultaneously. And I will now try to remember them off. There's reversal, there's obsolescence, there is basically intensification, and there is loss. The point is this. Did I say obsolescence? Yes. Obsolescence.
We'll come back to it.
We'll come back to it. But obsolescence is the important one because it indicates that media, communications, things that we create to extend our capabilities, retrieval. There we go. They not only push things into the past where they cannot be easily retrieved, but they reach back and pull things forward in the present that we cannot retrieve simply by saying, it would be great if humans were more X. If only things were like the good old days, Y. Maybe if we just make the right arguments and say the right things and use the right kind of poetic language, then we can encourage everyone to be more like they used to be. Maybe so, maybe not. Your mileage may vary. The McLuhans suggest that things will be retrieved back into your public life, into your senses and sensibilities, simply in virtue of the fact that the technologies that you create have these kinds of formative effects, these media. And so, what does McLuhan say about what computers retrieve into our life? What he identified in the retrieval quadrant, to use the sort of lingo, he said that what comes back is perfect memory, total, and exact. And so when you look at the database, what happens in the database in the digital age is more important oftentimes than what happens outside of the database. Just as when TV was the most powerful communications technology, what happened on screen was more important than what happened off screen. So you think of the Live Aid concert. Live Aid was a big deal because it was on the television. It was something that everyone saw at the same time. It was something that was captured through the most powerful medium, the most powerful form of communications technology. Same thing with the Berlin Wall. Yes, the Berlin Wall is a big deal. It was this epical sensation because it was all caught on television. It was a sort of moment when everyone who was watching the same thing at the same time could have, in a certain sense, a collective consciousness with regard to it. And yet, the TV as a mode of collective consciousness was fairly primitive. And when the hippies and the acid heads discovered the computer, Timothy Leary on down, what blew them away was wow, they throw us in jail for trying to drop acid together and have a sort of collective hallucination that way. But if we just log onto the internet, we can have a collective hallucination and not go to jail. In fact, we might even be able to just get really rich instead. And then we can sort of bring that collective consciousness experience into being on this planet. So what does all this have to do with the imagination? Well, if you go back to the TV days when the most powerful communications technology in the world was the television, the thing that was retrieved or that was emphasized by that medium was the imagination. If you could dream it, you could do it. I mean, all sort of the great slogans that, probably, I guess, most of us grew up with. Follow your passion, just do it, Willy Wonka, pure imagination. Right on up through Steve Jobs, think different, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Bono, these are the great figures, John Lennon, of the cult, I would almost say a religion of the imagination, but as John Lennon reminded us, no, there's no religion, we don't need to have, faith is unnecessary, faith is in fact probably bad for us, it's imagination that's going to save us. Imagination defines who we are, it is the queen of the sciences, it is the master of our faculties. If we do not have creativity, if we do not exercise our imagination, then we are really living an almost subhuman kind of life. And so the culture that emerged from the televisual era was one in which, logically, whoever imagined best would rule the world and deserved to rule the world. This is very powerful stuff. And it created or reinforced a sensibility that technological advancement was inherently good as long as it was kind of overseen or conducted under the rubric of the right ethics, the right imagination about who we are, that our imagined identity, if we got that right, if we were experts in imagining our identity in the biggest way, then any technology that was created within that milieu would reward us, would become a tool to accelerate and intensify and perfect our highest investment. And it was under that schema that the internet was created. Yes, the hardware, the guts, the nuts and bolts of the internet, were not created by acolytes of John, but were created by the military-industrial complex. These are military technologies. The military had the budget, the R&D. They wrote the blank checks. A lot of this stuff happened in secret. Manhattan Project was state, over 200,000 people working in secret, fake IDs scattered across the country, various installations. Many of them not Americans, American citizens sort of like as a courtesy. Many of them Hungarians, many of them geniuses, to the point where they were referred to as the Martians in and out of DC, because it was as if they were from another planet, came down these technologies. And so imagination ruled, but as computer technology got going, there was a new and rival media form. And in that form, it was not all about the imagination, certainly not about our imagination. It wasn't human imagination, human fantasy, human dream that ruled anymore, but it was machine memory. And this huge transformation from a world in which there was nothing more powerful, nothing more pure, nothing more true and definitive about the world and about how world order could be practiced than human imagination. To flip that all the way to, well, wait a minute, now it's like machines and the memory of machines that is dominant. Well, human memory had been atrophying pretty badly in an age where the imagination was considered all powerful. We were supposed to forget our ancient hatreds, forget our divides, all for religion, all this old stuff, that doesn't rule us. We don't need that anymore. We can dream better. And suddenly it was as if the rug had been pulled out, and we had these machines that were growing more and more powerful. Right at the point where we were weak, where we felt weakest on the ground of human memory, these machines were their strongest. And they could do all kinds of things that we could not do in the service of their form of recall. They could fly through the air. They could appear in different places at once. They could store information on a level that human brains seemed incapable of storing. They could communicate with themselves and with each other at speeds faster than human beings could communicate with themselves or with one another. And so this was a wrenching change. And the wrenching change came along with some huge disappointments, especially for those in charge. Well, wait a minute, what do you mean China isn't becoming more like us because they have a market economy? Well, wait, what do you mean Russia is taking the Crimea back? This isn't the 18th century? This is what John Kerry said. It's not the 19th century. You don't behave like this anymore. Shock after shock. Well, what do you mean, more people are converting to Catholicism over there? All these indicators. And they piled up to an extent that we've reached this kind of crisis point or inflection point. Everyone has a cell phone now. These machines are swarmed over the world. People now recognize, even if they're uncomfortable saying so or putting it into words, that digital technology rules the world in a way now that no person or group of persons can do. We have already lost control of the world to these machines that we have created. And so, I think that's good news and bad news. If you are a globalist,
to the good or bad news. But just contrast. So before the television age had this kind of kitsch democratic dreaminess to it.
Yes.
No distinctions between people. The world unite. Is that the same as the digital era morality? It kind of began that way, it seems. transformed into something else, but it still has these deeply seated, specifically democratic hopes.
Yes.
Is it that the power is different? Is it that the hopes have changed? What are they?
It is that the people in charge do not want to relinquish their control, their status, their privilege, their money, their sense of all of their work being worthwhile. So, so there is good news in that. If you think that globalization has been a failure, then well, good news. No one can take over the world anymore. No one ideology, no one framework, no one sovereignty. It's over. The machines took over the world, and we have to totally reconceive what it means to project power. If you are a member of the, whatever you want to call it, U.S.-led Western global rules-based international order, blah, whatever label you want to put on that, then this is terrible news. Then you feel just the moment where you're supposed to secure victory indefinitely, it all starts slipping away. And so there's a real conflict right now between those who are casting. So their wager is well, the human experiment has more or less failed. The best that we tried direct democracy, that didn't work. We tried representative democracy, that didn't work. We tried sort of industrial aristocracy, that didn't really work either. And now we have sort of the global elite, and sorry, we broke the financial system, and all of our enemies are stronger, and we lost all our wars, and dollar's worthless, and debt's out of control, and
you can have Oculus.
But you can have Oculus. And so how do you sort of shift people, transition them in an orderly fashion from this imploding system to one that's a new system, but it's not really new because the people in charge are still in charge, just in a different way. And so there's a power struggle going on. And one center of power is people who say, all we need is to get the technology right. We can do this, we have the intelligence, we have the machines, we can solve for humanity, we don't need politics anymore, we can perfect this kind of technological superstructure and just make the robots do it, because humans can't do it. Humans suck, we've had 5,000 years to sort of test this out, inequality never goes away, and always angry people, or killing each other, there's depression, it's a disaster. Make the robots do it. And then there's another group, and the other group says well, let's not forget the lessons of the 60s, right? The lessons of the 60s are, the power structure is always going to tend towards some kind of evil or malevolence or harm or injustice. And the only thing that can save us is not just better and better machines or a better and better system, but people who are pure spirit, pure consciousness within, right? If we just liberate among everyone that pure consciousness, then that's what will save us. And so right now what's playing out is, I think, the very highest levels is this sort of struggle between, on the one hand, you can call them the wokes or whatever, people who are convinced that it's human ethics that needs to be perfected in order to save us. And then you got, sort of the techies on the other side. That's not quite right. Human ethics always mess up. What we'll do is we'll make math so deterministic, we'll perfect machines, that's what's going to save us. And they are jockeying for control right now over our regime, over how our regime is going to be set back up on its feet in a way that will allow us to survive and thrive in a digital age. Some of the techies think that the wokies are kind of right. Some of the wokies think that some of the techies are kind of right. And it's just really a power struggle right now. We're seeing it play out every day. And my view is that both of those sort of twisted forms of optimism are fundamentally incorrect. You've got one group that's so optimistic about our humanity that they ignore reality, and then you've got another group that's so optimistic about our technology that they deny our humanity. Neither of those are going to save us, no matter who wins this sort of power struggle, and we need a third way.
So it may be the case, though, that the second camp that basically wants to download the consciousness onto, a hard drive may just fail, because that's just a hope that technology can never fulfill. So you maybe stop the first camp that you mentioned, the ones that want to use the technology to somehow curtail or in their view perfect human nature. If there was, a thing that their technology could get rid of, a thing in us, so as to bring about all of the hopes, what is that thing?
It's the body. Body's bad. I mean, the Gnostic theology since the beginning, And, this is sort of an equal opportunity destroyer of religion. You see it in Judaism, you see it every sect and denomination of Christianity over the past however many thousand years. It has appeared. It seems to be some kind of fundamental religious configuration that is very adaptable and that is very difficult to completely purge from any religious system. The Soviets had a doctrine of cosmos, which was right in the same key. We're going to use technology, we're going to perfect ethics, and we're going to use it to transcend our humanity. Humanity is not just inherently errant, but is basically garbage, and the sooner that we can shake ourselves loose our own humanity, the better. And that is what we are being heavily marketed right now. That is what we are being pushed aggressively toward by our regime. And this is why, 2 years ago, no one had really any experience sort of arguing about trans issues. And now today, I dare you cannot. It's like the Simpsons episode where they keep hanging out the zero on the days since an accident or whatever. You cannot go a day without talking about queer sexuality and its role in lifting people out of the injustice of their humanity. It is constant, unremitting drumbeat, and trans issues have moved to the top of the stack because this is the leading edge. This is our best way currently to use technology to break the grip of our biological reality and to push ourselves in a direction where our will and our vision of superhumanity or post-humanity can be actualized and used as a model, as a vanguard for how to transform society and to restructure life for the digital age.
Yes. We've talked about this, I've heard you say in other places, that you think that only some new technology can fix this. Number one is, what would that look like? What precisely do you have in mind? And two, why not political outcomes? I mean, why not use political powers to disrupt this trajectory? I mean, the sense that you have in America is that, we are on a runaway train of technology, and we just have to ride it, no matter what. And it seems to me no other country, no other serious country can follow it. That there can be political tools to put a stop to some of the problems that you're describing. But I get the sense always that you think that that's somehow impossible.
Well, right. So I put it this way. If you are a statesman in 2021, you are leading let's call them civilization states. You're leading a civilization state big enough, strong enough, powerful enough land, enough security, and enough of a kind of ancient or even almost primordial civilizational inheritance, which usually comes from village. If that describes your regime, you are racing against the clock to figure out how to use your people's deepest and strongest resources, unique resources, to reassert a kind of political control over digital. You see the Chinese doing this. But you also see, Russia's response in the digital age was to build an enormous military from scratch, with an enormous golden, resurrection of Christ sort of coming out of the azure of the and to put out, very beautiful videos with, deep captions. This marks a new relationship between the military and the church in Russia. You see India exercising its kind of civilizational sovereignty over its internet in increasingly forceful ways. The Israelis are doing this. There's no shortage of sort of tech geniuses who take their civilization seriously. And in what's left of the West, Europe, the UK, the US, there is a civil war. There's a civil war over which elements of our civilization will be the ones that we need to use to reassert not just political, but theological control over our machine. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I think the British are not doing the right thing right now. They seem to be quite serious about sort of global Britain mindset. And you just look like Prince Charles, or what is Prince Harry doing in the U.S.? Like, that's new shit. Why are we not asking how it is that the dodgy dossier that resulted in a bogus Russia investigation issued from the man who ran MI6's Russia desk during the financial crisis? Not really retired. We're not asking these questions. That's bad. British are on the wrong track. And the Americans are just confused. We blindsided by these changes. America's always been sort of pluralistic in a certain salutary way. We need to retain that. We won't be America if we lose that. At the same time that the world is learning that one human power is not going to rule the world, Americans need to reckon with the fact that technology has retrieved for us the irreducibility of our kind of political and cultural pluralism. And so, when the wokies and the techies think about combining forces to impose one sort of social credit system over the U.S., that's not just, the wrong idea. I think it's just a bad idea. It does not map. It's a graph that will not take in the U.S. And they're just courting trouble when they try to do this. So, as far as the technology, it's not like the days of old where you could just throw a wooden clog into the ears and break the machine. Buddhism, you can't. It's not just like, well, if you don't like what's on TV, you just turn it off. That's what would it even mean to try to destroy the technology that we've created without in some way destroying ourselves? Ted Kaczynski, some other people had some ideas about this, but all Ted Kaczynski managed to do was just make David Blunder more famous. To not succeed in killing him. He was named. That is unfortunate, but Blunder went right on. It is the reality of the fact that there are so many rich and intelligent people at the very highest levels of society who are pushing technological advancement as fast and as hard as they are. There's no real way to stop that. I mean, we can't, even if all moral scruple was gone, even if we had sort of all of the guns and bombs that we wanted, even if, the Congress passed a war resolution, we will, stamp out this blight from there. It's not that easy. You can't win a digital war using conventional weapons. That doesn't mean that conventional weapons are useless, but it means that there's a digital war going on right now among all of the great powers, and also this kind of digital civil war in the West. And it can't be won by trying to turn things off or break machines. Even though the political side is necessary for us to be Americans, to defend and protect our way of life, to salvage to whatever degree we can our constitutionally guaranteed form of government, it is not sufficient. And it's not sufficient because that kind of activity does not necessarily give ordinary Americans the ability and the understanding of why they need to themselves gain control of the most powerful digital technologies. All of this political activity is great, but if it doesn't result in Americans understanding how to rule databases, how to use the most powerful forms of compute to tell the databases to do things that are good for us as Americans, us as human beings, then those databases are going to do things to us instead that we do not want them to do. That we do not want to do. And so this is a question of what resources we have right now that can help Americans to quickly catch up in a responsible way and use our most powerful digital technologies for their benefit, to increase, to protect, defend their ability to create culture, to create things that are memorable and valuable, and exchange them with one another. It's like Machiavelli in Prince talked about how you needed to slap fate around fortune. You slap fortune around, woman, the harder you hit her, the more she listens to you. Kind of like triggering stuff these days or something. But the reality is that compute is a lot like this. If you do not have the whip hand, compute is going to do stuff to you that you do not want to. Americans need to figure out how to tell the databases how to serve them. I think the best way for them to do that is through Bitcoin. Publish this book on Bitcoin. It's going to be going out on Bitcoin. It's going to be encrypted onto the blockchain. for sale in Bitcoin. And why did I do this? Because the medium is the message. People need to know that it's not just something that you just like put in a virtual wallet and watch the number go up. If you're doing that, I'm not here to attack you. The number go up is fine. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't reclaim human space-time for us in a way that allows us to be political animals at all. If we lose control of these databases, if we lose control of these machines, then the possibility, the space and time that we need to conduct human politics is going to be lost as well.